Yes.
Testing, testing. Oh, here it is. All right. Ooh, you're fired. we got the council president fixing how to get down there.
Just have the lawn switch.
Wow, one switch. All right. Welcome, folks. Welcome to the Hoc River Committee special meeting.
A little too much.
I want to welcome Councilmember Eric Garcetti. Thank him for his many talents in the council.
Audio.
We'll be getting the audio going. But we do have a few items on today's agenda and quite a few speakers we'd like to hear from. So let's just dive in, and I'm pretty sure the other councilors are on their way. And our first item, sir?
Item number 1 is an oral report from the Environmental Protection Agency relative to Los Angeles River navigability.
Great. And we have with us both David Smith, Chief Wetlands Regulatory Office, EPA Region 9, as well as David Castagnon. Is David here? Would like to come on up? There's a microphone with your name. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming down here. And if you don't mind, just for the record, introduce yourself one more time.
Sure. Hi, I'm Dave Smith, and I'm the Chief of the Wetlands Office for EPA's office in San Francisco. I'm happy to be here. Happy to see you again, Councilman Reyes.
Thank you, sir.
And I'll give Dave Castagnon a chance to introduce himself before I speak.
David Castagnon, and I'm Dave's counterpart at the Corps of Engineers here in the Los Angeles District. I manage the regulatory program, which implements Section 404 of the Clean Water Act.
Great. Please.
Thank you. I'm also going to mention one of my colleagues, John Kemmerer, who's sitting in the back. He's the Associate Director of our Water Division, and he works out of our Southern California field office, and will be assisting as we move forward working on Los Angeles River issues.
Great.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what EPA is doing associated with Los Angeles River jurisdiction and navigability. And but before I get to that, I'd like to just spend a minute placing this in a little bit broader context, because navigability and jurisdictional things are pretty arcane, and it's just a small slice of what EPA's interest in the Los Angeles River is. And so I wanted to just spend a minute about what is the broader context that brings us here.
David, if I could just ask you to pause for a second. I overlooked one thing. There is an individual who wants to be able to film this proceeding. So I want to make sure that everyone is aware that this will be filmed by an independent party, and then hopefully there are no issues with that. But I want to make sure that announcement was made. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. First of all, I think it's significant that EPA, in using its special case authorities to look at navigability on the Los Angeles River, was partly motivated by our strong interest in the protection of the Los Angeles River and its restoration. This is one of the most important water bodies in our region, and we thought that it warranted this unusual step by EPA to assist in its protection and restoration. So thinking about it in its broader context, EPA and the Regional Water Board, which is the main implementing authority for the Clean Water Act, or most of the Clean Water Act, believe strongly in taking a watershed approach to protecting our water resources and protecting the environment. And it means looking not only at the main stem of the river, but looking at its tributaries. And the bottom line is, to protect the river, we have to protect its tributaries. And I think we'll see that's where this navigability matter becomes important. It's about protecting the tributaries, and therefore allowing us to take a broader approach to protecting the river and its watershed as a whole. As you know, EPA and the Water Board do many things to try to address and protect the watershed, including providing a great deal of funding, a lot of technical assistance, certainly regulatory programs as well as non-regulatory programs to address a host of issues. They include assisting in setting goals for the river through the TMDL process that I know the city has been very active in the basin planning process to set other goals, certainly in trying to address individual pollutant sources, including urban stormwater, treated wastewater discharges, as well as runoff from contaminated sites. We also are increasingly trying to focus our resources on restoration of tributaries and their hydrologic functions and their ecological functions. And so I just wanted to mention those things because this focus on navigability is just a piece of what we do. And I wish that we could use this opportunity to talk more broadly about our vision for the river, but time is short. I know a lot of people want to speak, so I'm going to kind of hone back in on the navigability piece of this.
We could always invite you back.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
And so the bottom line question is, why is navigability important? It's important because we need to know where the navigable waters are in order to establish jurisdiction on tributaries in the watershed. Now, traditionally, the Army Corps of Engineers has day-to-day operational responsibility for establishing jurisdiction and navigability. And they do that under the Rivers and Harbors Act, which has been in effect since the 19th century, and also under the Clean Water Act. And as you may know, the Corps also has lead responsibility for implementing Section 404, which deals with the regulation of the placement of dredge and fill material in our waters. So the Corps has been kind of on the front edge of this issue. Navigability became much more important to determining federal jurisdiction after a key Supreme Court decision about 3 years ago, the so-called Rapanos decision. And it's important to emphasize that there's no question that the Los Angeles River itself is subject to federal jurisdiction. I think there's been some misunderstandings on that. I don't think there's any question about it. But the question has to do with its tributaries. This Rapanos decision directed the Corps and EPA, in essence, to look at whether and how tributaries affect navigable waters, either adversely affect them or possibly beneficially affect them. So it looks at the connection between the upstream waters and these downstream navigable waters. So you have to know where the navigable waters are in order to analyze these upstream tributaries. The bottom line is the closer you are to the navigable water, the easier it is to establish jurisdiction on the tributaries. If you're 5 miles away, it is a hugely different analytical task than if you're 50 miles away. So that's why we've gotten so focused on navigability. And in looking at the relationship between the tributaries and the navigable water, the Supreme Court used this term significant nexus between one and the other. So that's how we got more focused on this. Now, although the Corps has day-to-day responsibility for jurisdictional matters, EPA has the final decision on Clean Water Act jurisdiction. And it was out of that arrangement that some arrangements were made between the Corps and EPA, where EPA could invoke so-called special case authority to assert our final say on this from time to time, where we may potentially have disagreed with a Corps decision, or we felt that a decision was so important that EPA had to make the decision. Now, here on the Los Angeles River, as you may know, the Army Corps found 2 segments of the Los Angeles River navigable in June of 2008, and that's the approximately 2-mile reach around Sepulveda Basin, and then the tidally influenced portion down around and below Pacific Coast Highway. And that's a decision that EPA supported. And I want to emphasize in making that decision, the Corps did not decide that anything on the river was not navigable. They haven't made any decisions on the rest of the river. However, many parties were concerned that the navigability fate of the rest of the river had not been decided. And so a lot of people pushed EPA to get involved to try to bring clarity to that issue. Along the same time, there are many questions about navigability on other western rivers. And one in particular has been controversial and gotten a lot of attention in Washington, and that's the Santa Cruz River that flows through Tucson, Arizona. The key problem, I think, underlying all of this is that the national guidance that was issued by EPA and the Corps after this Rapanos Supreme Court decision just wasn't clear about how you look at navigability in western rivers. As you know, western rivers are different from rivers in the wetter parts of this country. And it's a challenge for all of us to figure out how to responsibly address them and regulate them and protect them under the Clean Water Act. So I'd say the Corps and EPA have been doing our best, but there was a need for greater clarity in how to deal with this situation. So with a lot of help from my regional office, EPA headquarters made a decision late this summer to take over the jurisdictional decisions on the Los Angeles River and the Santa Cruz River through this special case authority. Our hope is that this will clarify how to do this for the rest of the rivers in Southern California and in the more arid parts of the West. So how are we going to do this? And I'm going to just focus on Los Angeles River here. We're going to look at the whole main stem of the river. But in saying that, we're not really looking at its tributaries. I don't think that there's a lot of a feel that the tributaries to the Los Angeles River are themselves navigable. But our charge from EPA headquarters is to look at the main stem of the river. And in doing this, we're going to try to answer basically four questions. The key factors we're going to look at are, first, hydrology. Can the river or portions of the river float boats? That seems pretty natural to look at. And how often? What kinds of boats? Things like that. And so that leads you to look at things like flow and the depth of the river and things like that. Second, we look at boating. What is the history of people trying to put watercraft on the river in the past, in the present, and also looking to the future? What plans do people have for the future? We look at access. Can the public get to the river? Is there parking? Is there road access? And things like that. And if there's no access or everything's bordered by private property, it's harder to assert navigability on some rivers. And then finally, probably the trickiest part is to look at interstate commerce. Generally, the federal government only regulates where there's some kind of an interstate commerce interest or some other overarching federal interest. Otherwise, it's usually left to state or local governments to regulate their affairs. But here we need to see, is there some basis for saying that there's a commerce connection associated with navigation on the river? We're not going to be looking at, do people move timber by barges, or are they running ferry services, or are they renting whitewater rafting supplies, that kind of thing. But we are going to look at recreation and to see whether either now or in the future is there a possibility of interstate use of this resource for navigation. I know this seems pretty arcane, but unfortunately these are the rules that we have to work with. Now to do this, we want to compile and look at as much information and data as we can get, certainly from the Corps, and we're going to try to build on the good work the Corps has already done, but we're also going to look at all we can get from other agencies, and as much as we can get from the city, but the members of the public in terms of what they know about the river and what they think it should be in the future. You folks know more about your rivers than we do, and we need to learn from your experiences. And so we've been inviting input, we've received some, and we'd like to receive more. And so we're looking for opportunities like this to get the word out as much as possible to those who can provide us their information, their experiences, and so forth. Our hope is to have some kind of a draft initial decision by the end of 2008. It is not the general practice to have a big comment period or something like that on these decisions, but I think that we will certainly be willing to talk to people about our decision as we get closer. But that's the time frame we're looking at, is try to get it drafted by the end of 2008, then it gets put through the sausage maker in Washington, D.C., and the final decision will be made by the Office of Water in Washington. And I want to emphasize one thing. While we're going to be making decisions on navigability, we're not going to be making a decision about whether it's wise to boat on the Los Angeles River, whether it should or should not be allowed, and under what parameters. That is not EPA's role, and we leave it to local entities and officials to work with the public to figure out what's going on, because I'm aware that there's a controversy about how to strike the right balance between recreational access and protecting public safety. That is not EPA's role to decide. So what's next? As I mentioned, we're looking for information, data, input. We're not being restrictive at this point. We are looking for technical input in particular about water flow, its depth, that kind of thing, people's experiences boating and recreating on the river. We want to understand what the people want the river to be for them. We're looking for information on public access and restrictions to access if there are any. As I mentioned, we're interested in exploring commercial connections. Do do people bring their cousins in from out of state to go recreate on the river?
Duck tours.
Pardon me?
Duck tours like they have in Boston.
Sounds good to me. Things along those lines. And since this is something we're still just figuring out how to do, we're looking broadly to see people's ideas about current and future potential use and how commerce might be involved with that. And related to that, we've reviewed your master plan that the city has developed and obviously invested so much energy in. And we want to really try to understand better what's the city's vision of how boating fits into that master plan. And we would look forward to working with you folks and with your staffs to better be able to better articulate how we should read the master plan in that respect. I've got some contact information up there. I'd be happy to provide it to folks in the audience as well. And as I said, this is a little arcane slice of a much bigger picture of trying to protect and restore the river. And I'm hopeful that this will allow us to keep doing so and to help protect the watershed in cooperation with you folks. I'll stop there.
First, I appreciate the presentation, and do have a couple of questions. And did you want to add anything else to this?
No, I didn't have any prepared statements
Okay.
for today.
I just want to make sure you had that opportunity. But do you have any plans for public input? Other than inviting folks to send you information, do you have any plans for any kind of public input as you go through your process?
EPA headquarters, the Office of Water, made a decision that they did not want to set up a formal public input process with notice and comment and that kind of thing. As I mentioned, that is not the practice and how this has been done other places. Having said that, it's still my intention to be as open and try to get the word out to as many people as possible, to invite their input through whatever means they want to. Written, they can call us, things like that. And I think there's some possibility that some additional meetings will be set up. I don't think EPA is going to be calling them, but we will be at them. And we're looking for opportunities to hear input as broadly as we can. Although I do need to respect, my admonition that we're not going to be operating a formal comment period.
I understand. Let me give a what-if scenario. Let's assume that we have a time and place at the River Center, near the river, and it's about trying to get input as to how we can facilitate information that would help you. And let's say a council office or council offices sponsor that. Is that something you might be amenable to?
I will be there. Just tell me the place. For what it's worth, we're already talking to a watershed group in the Santa Cruz River watershed that have offered to set up a meeting of that kind. And we would certainly participate in that kind of opportunity.
Great. And when do you foresee reaching a decision? Is there a time frame that you're looking at?
As I said, I'm going to try to have my job done by the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
As this is a decision that's being made in Washington, D.C., what I think you'd recognize is a rather awkward time of the political season.
Exactly.
I honestly I can't give you a firm prediction. I think people do want us to get done with our work, and so my hope is that we would have a decision by spring.
Okay, great. Councilmember, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your good work on this and your participation. We very much appreciate what you've done in the public interest here. I just had one quick question on the 4 criteria. Is the lack of any of those a deal breaker, or is it a cumulative kind of assessment that you'll make depending on how much weight in each one? I mean, in other words, if one of those, for instance, if we don't have a lot of interstate commerce, if you go back, is any of those a deal breaker if we have low or zero inputs on any one of those categories?
Well, Dave may have a view on this, but for EPA, I will say the one thing that probably could be a deal breaker concerns hydrology.
Mm-hmm.
If there's not enough water to float boats,
Sure.
and there's only enough water to float boats a couple days a year, that might be a deal breaker.
And that's a snapshot now, not in the past necessarily. I mean, obviously, before we had a steadier flow of water because of the treated water that we put back into the river, that doesn't count as a penalty. We're looking at a snapshot today.
We would be looking principally at current conditions. We'd consider the past.
Sure.
We'd also potentially consider the future. But I think we know most what's going on now. And we would certainly consider the fact that there is a lot of treated effluent in the stream that does create a perennial flow now. That's the condition we're looking at principally right now.
And hypothetically, when there was less of a flow, if Tom LeBonge had taken a Crown Victoria up the river, would that count as navigability, or is that?
You know, there's all kinds of navigation.
It skidded. It floated. I was in that car.
Well, we were
Glad it didn't
considering that if we're considering commerce, maybe we should consider all the movie shoots and TV shoots. But
We know
30th
somebody.
anniversary-
We know somebody
anniversary
started a
of
race
Greece.
down there. You got it right there.
Grease Lightning.
The way I said earlier about in certain cities, even in San Francisco, I think you have a duck tour. You have a little duck boat. You ever seen it down at the wharf, where they get in the back and they go in the bay? Anybody ever seen that anywhere in Boston? So yeah, Murphy has. Good to see you, Cap Murphy. Okay. The thing I'd like to see us do in the future is to be able to connect that. We just started hop on, hop off, double-decker tours to downtown and the cultural sites. Wouldn't it be great if we could have a approved vehicle that could go into the river where appropriate, just to show them the river, even some of the movie scenes which are part of Los Angeles' folklore. But I would say this, though. I remember as a child growing up in Silver Lake, I knew the river was there, and I would hear really what were the train whistles from Taylor Yard, the train horns. And I thought they were ships coming up the river, you know, a little tug. You know, so I would like to see some dikes in the river to get the water, number one, because we would be able to catch the trash before it gets to Long Beach. There's so much we have to do to try to get it out now, and that just when the first, if anybody hasn't been on the river in the last several months, it's prime time right now because it's its most beautiful point. Where it's going to turn is when the first flush comes with the rains and all the drains that come off the street. But if there was some kind of catch water for the water to catch, at certain strategic points, whether it's 7th Street or not, you'd fill the water in. There's a project out near NBC, Universal. I'm going to try to ask for some help to put a check dam, because the Department of Water and Power previously created a check dam out in that area to pump water out of the river to go into the spreading basins, which was a cycle which they did. So it's something to look at.
No, absolutely. And again,
Yeah.
the rubber dam concept is something that I hope we can take advantage of in the future.
Yeah.
And create these artificial water bodies.
And the only thing I just want to say, whatever we do, we got to be real safety, because I know the fire department was very sad when Adam Bischoff lost his life in Sepulveda Basin. When any child loses his life, whatever we do, we got to do it right, because it's the worst stunt for a stunt man or stunt woman in Hollywood is not jumping out of the Bonaventure, but it's doing with water, because water is an unpredictable strength.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Ed, and welcome to San Francisco man.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw San Francisco. I rode across the Golden Gate Bridge on a bike. You ever done that?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, right.
Well, you know, all I will say is you mentioned the
And tell these
idea-
supervisors we love Tommy Lasorda. They were giving him trouble. I don't know if you saw.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? You know, all I'll say is, you know, the master plan did talk a little bit about the use of inflatable dams, and that's the kind of thing we'd be interested in exploring a little bit more, and just, you know, extend that, just get a sense of where you think that's going, because that kind of thing could be quite critical in our determination.
And we're pushing hard in DC to get the resources to make sure we can hit that kind of budget to make those changes occur. So we're constantly pounding away and trying to get those resources. But I do want to thank you for being here. And this is one grand opening for EPA to step in and assist in the Los Angeles River. We appreciate that. In terms of opportunities to invite EPA's participation in the Greater River and Watershed effort, because this is the beginning dialogue, where we're just looking at the main stem. But I'm assuming we can increase this dialogue, enhance it, and look at a greater scope when appropriate. But for right now, we need to take care of this matter. So I want to welcome you, but I want to ask you, is that something that we could look forward to in the future?
Well, I think it is, and actually one reason I wanted to introduce my colleague here is that we do have a presence here in Los Angeles, and we'd like to put I have a staff person here in Los Angeles as well, and we'd like to look for opportunities to, you know, work more directly with the city, with the Water Board, the Corps, and others to kind of build on this. I view this as a foundational thing, but build on that and try to move forward and see if we can help with funding those kinds of things.
Well, thank you again, and thank you for your hard work, and thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, item number 2. I don't see any cards for public comment on item 1, so let's move to item number 2.
Item number 2, the report from the Bureau of Sanitation in response to motion Reyes-Garcetti-Gruel relative to the consequences of the Army Corps' determination of traditional navigable waterways as it relates to the Los Angeles River.
Okay. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Shram Karagani, Bureau of Sanitation. Mr. Chair, as you know, the Bureau of Sanitation has issued a memo to the issue of Los Angeles River designation. As the previous speakers indicated that they are going to a special case, the LA River, and our summary of the 3 recommendations that we have is first is to make sure that if there is opportunity to identify a new definition of Southwest rivers for the climate that we have, if that can be incorporated so the Supreme Court can be interpreted easy. That was number 1 recommendation we have. Recommendation number 2 is to the city legislative analyst office to work to support the HR 2421 that identifies a stream rather in a more broader fashion as far as dry or wet based on our climate. That should help again to interpret the Supreme Court cases a little bit easier. And last but not least is the issue as the previous speakers indicated that we need to have input to the system as they go through determination of the other parts of the Los Angeles River. Those are in summary is what the memo suggests.
Great.
I would be happy to answer any questions.
And the fact that the EPA is taking this as a special case issue moves this process along to a degree where we can be more specific, as you indicated.
Absolutely. This is a welcome news, and we would work with Mr. Smith and others to make sure that our input and data that we have on the Los Angeles River is communicated to them and answer any questions they may have.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions for staff?
Just do we know the status of 2421?
I don't have the status update right now. Is it a resolution in support of it? I believe is pending in the Rules and Government Committee.
Okay. If we could find out the status of that, that would be helpful, because
Sure.
I know we have a relationship with Chairman Oberstar now. We spent some time with him last year, and I think he's pretty fond of LA and some of the transportation things we want to do. So we've got a friend and an ally in that, and we can see how we might assist him with passing that. And you know, National League of Cities may be interested in looking at this too, Mr. Chair. So.
Okay, we will move that. The well, it's in committee now.
I believe the city's position is pending in the Rules and Government Committee. I'm not sure the status of the federal bill, but I can get that information back to you.
Be good, and perhaps then we can speak to the committee members and see how they can move that along.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Councilor Labange?
I'm okay because you're okay.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
So the action of this committee will be to approve the recommendations in the Bureau of Sanitation report. Have a second on that?
Second.
Second, it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, third item?
Item 3 is verbal presentations on river uses, barriers, opportunities, and long-term and short-term recommendations.
Okay. So you have the staff, if they'd like to. What we'll do here is we'll go through some speakers, and we got some speaker cards on this item. And we have with us I have my own special sheet on item number 3. So we have a list of speakers who'd like to come on up, and Shram would like to be the first one. Then and then we'll have Captain Murphy, and then Chief Ed Rushman. You'd like to come on up, Captain? There's a mic for you. Okay. We can keep it to 3 minutes. That way we can move this along. That'd be great.
Shram Karagani, Bureau of Sanitation. Mr. Chair, as you know, the Los Angeles River has a number of TMDLs that we have received over the past years, trash, metals, nutrients, toxic sediments, and these are promulgated in the watershed. So as far as opportunities is concerned, we have been working for the past 4 or 5 years to create 3 master plans, Los Angeles River Revitalization Plan, Water Quality Compliance Master Plan, and IRP. All those 3 plans create, in my mind, the roadmap that how all of us can work together to not only meet the water quality and the TMDL standards that we have, also create, increased habitat, water conservation, rainwater use. So in my mind, the opportunity of communication and building upon those plans are very important part. The other major stakeholders in the Los Angeles River, Corps of Engineering, other municipalities that are also discharged to the LA River would be helpful. And of course, if we work together, we would identify, and I have number of studies we have done on the LA River as far as use, what we call source ID and water use in the LA River that I could share with the stakeholders, that which part of Los Angeles River is being used the most based on a survey that we have done, and we have collected data. So communication of those information based on those 3 plans that I mentioned to you, the LA River Revitalization Plan, IRP, and Water Quality Compliance Master Plans, would help us, to create that roadmap, strategic, direction that we want to get.
So the overlays of these different infrastructural projects will give us a better idea of, for example, dealing with the cleansing of the waterway before it gets to the ocean, where the heaviest pockets of debris and trash emerging from the city is collected, and how we respond to it. These 3 overlays will give us a better perspective.
Yes.
Great. Council members, any questions?
Not yet, but you're
Okay.
sticking around?
Yes.
You don't-
All right.
I mean,
Please.
or somebody.
All right.
You have to go.
Captain Murphy. Again, again, this item is about having a verbal presentation on river uses, barriers, opportunities, and long-term and short-term recommendations. Captain?
Yes, a couple things real quickly. I just came from a tour of the river this morning with my senior lead officer and actually the supervisor of the SLO unit standing beside me, Danny Roman and Gina Chauvin, who know the issues down there for many, many years, especially SLO Chauvin. Did get an opportunity. I looked at the revitalization plan and different websites on it to get up to speed, because I've been here for about 6 months, and totally support the vision within that plan, the revitalize river, the green, the neighborhood, the capture the community opportunities and create value. However, I do have some concerns how the river exists today in its current format, which is beautiful, it's aesthetically pleasing, and when I was down there, I was actually really surprised that it is that beautiful and what a jewel it is for the city. However, to use it for some of the recreational uses that are being discussed would concern me greatly at this point, short of funding and kind of engineering and making it better for boating and fishing and swimming in the river. I think we could be very, very dangerous. Need I remind you, about 2 years ago on August 15th, 2006, Andre Torres was down there with his brother and his sister. They went down to the fish. Unfortunately, Andre fell into the river and tragically died. That was in August, which is the middle of the summertime, so clearly the river could be dangerous at any time of the year. So I would have grave concerns if it, unless the funding and the improvements were done there. In addition to that, having talked with the senior lead officers and different community members and actually staff, there have been many close calls down there at the river where kids have gotten into it and been swept up. So there is a concern there on my part and on behalf of the police department. Certainly if we could fund it, we could find a way to make it safe, I'd be 100% behind that. I just want to share my concerns right now with how it exists at this moment.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. And we did put numbers along the riverway to help identify where folks are located, how to get a vehicle to that spot. Is that working?
Yeah, I think that helps. I'd also put one that's on the ground, and I saw that. In fact, one was at 22.59, and that's right at Fletcher when we were doing the tour today. You might want to put a more visual one up above too, and maybe something close to the way that the police and fire respond to those are crossroads, cross streets. So at Fletcher and whatever the cross might be better to also to consider something like that.
I see.
Like a block system.
Yeah, block system.
Right.
Yeah.
To connect
Yeah.
with the number system.
And we did
Great.
build that in, I believe, into our dispatch. So as far as the miles go, but
And do we do the training of that for new officers as well?
we could do that. Yes, we
I
could.
mean, I know when we initially did it, there was a training for Northeast, but just to keep that up and to make sure that, the protocol continues, I think is really critical too.
Absolutely, and by no means am I advocating not using it. I think everybody should go down there and walk and bike, and those little pocket parks are just spectacular, and I hope we can fund it so it does have the vision what's in that plan, because I thought that was outstanding when they had that boatable version of the river in there. If we could achieve that, that would be great.
Well, we did finish the last parcel along the riverway for continuing the bike path from Fletcher going towards downtown. And so that parcel was completed, and we're hoping to see construction in the near future. And we should fold in those security elements as we go through that design process. Anything else?
It's just when I think, in terms of bike patrols, I know, when we kind of launched doing some of that, there was regularity. How is that keeping up? What sort of regularity or numbers are we getting to do that?
I think it's a little bit less. A lot of the bikes have been putting on other higher crime areas. I think when it first came out, when we had some of the issues down there, it got a tremendous amount of attention. From time to time, they do go down there, but I wouldn't say it's on a weekly basis. It's probably more on a monthly basis. But we'll certainly, anybody in the community or anyone from your staff see a need for it, I'll try to put more down
Yeah,
there.
if you can let us
Yeah.
know, above you who's making the deployment decisions, we'll be happy to assist to continue those more regularly.
No problem, no problem.
Great. Any questions, Councilman?
I just want to thank the senior lead officers and the sergeant. I think it's real important to have that local knowledge of it. It is a situation that is a dynamic that's changing. Every month there is a brighter view on the river, and I like your encouragement. I know you have some intrepidation, I think the word is, on realization of what's happening there. But one thing we talked about years ago, Ed, and you know this, the police department's got to commit to some type of bike patrol on there at some point, and then what Eric just mentioned would be that, and whether it's just training, and we have to continue to get this bikeway all the way out through Universal City to the valley, all the way out, and we could connect to Hunger Wash with Hanson Dam. There's a whole spine that goes through the city that we could do at Sepulveda Basin. But it would be nice if people would ride on that, ride bicycles on that, who are in training, and go on it. And it's absolutely. Do you ride a bicycle, Captain?
I do, not as good as my bike unit officers,
good.
but I'll definitely I'll pick it up more.
What time?
I run a lot. That's
You
what
run a
I
lot.
do.
Yeah, I don't run anymore. But what time do you start work?
Well, I protect and serve probably 20 hours a day a lot.
All right,
So.
well, good. I start early. I start early, so we could ride it sometime.
Yeah.
It'd be fun. It'll be a
Okay.
whole different thing. Great. Thank you.
All right, sounds like a date.
You got it?
All right. Okay, folks.
Very good, Ed.
Thank you so much. I'd like to call up Wing Tam and Chief Ed Bushman. Is Wing Tam here? Oh, you're together? All right. So I'm just going through the list. I want to leave anybody out. I also want to thank our senior officers and our sergeants for being here. Thank you so much, sir. Please.
Welcome, sirs. My name is Edward Bushman. I'm a battalion chief with the Los Angeles Fire Department.
Let's move the
I'm in
microphone a
charge-
little bit closer to you. There you go.
Excuse me. I'm in charge of the disaster preparedness section, which includes urban search and rescue, CERT public education, and the swiftwater rescue teams. I would like to say that the fire department supports the plan to revitalize the river, create more recreational uses and outdoor activities. However, those plans must also be supported by additional public safety resources. The fire department provides rescue 24/7 in the Los Angeles area rivers, and as we've heard, there have been accidents all year round. Our normal first responders are supplemented on days of high inclement weather, rains, large releases, by adding additional swift water teams, which have additional capabilities. However, those people are only on duty, as I say, anywhere from 4 to 30 days per year. And we don't provide additional in-the-water rescue activities beyond that. And we have to also be aware that moving water presents a whole new set of rescue responsibilities and rescue risks to our people and to the citizens of Los Angeles, realizing also that the river is very unpredictable with increased flows, and it's not necessarily even during days of inclement weather. We have upriver releases or storms upriver that can cause increases in flows that their normal fishing spots could be inundated in a rather quickly time. Okay. If we do move forward with this kind of plan, the fire department would love to be included in any kind of discussions. We will assist in any way we can. We'll work towards creating safeguards to limit access to the rivers during these times of inclement weather where our risk is increased tremendously. And we would love to work with this committee to continue to discuss our activities and how we can support the program.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions, my colleague?
Do you keep statistics in terms of the number of rescues from the LA River year to year?
We do keep statistics. I did not bring those with me.
Okay.
Last year was a very slow year. We only had 4 days of swiftwater deployment due to the low level of rains. Other years, we're up to 30, 35 days of deployments. I'll get you the statistics
Okay.
on the actual number of rescues that we've made.
Maybe I feel I can help get locations in just,
Right.
5 years back or 10 years back, something like
Okay.
that.
Well, the propensity for danger and where these stats actually occur, I mean, these incidents could probably help us look at the built-out environment and see how we can do things on a short term and with a long-term context. And perhaps if we get that map to see where they occur would probably be very helpful.
Okay. Okay, we will work on that too, the location of our rescues.
Great, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, and I just say, if you could look at other cities with other rivers to see what protocols they have. We do have a block section in Griffith Park, and I do know, we tried this concept with marking on the mile marking on the river, but maybe there's a block map that needs to be, because everything is run off address basically in Los Angeles. And if you say Hyperion Bridge, what side of Hyperion Bridge, east and west side of the river, maybe we should also have markings, because what is the Taylor Yard side of the river? Is that the east side of the river, or is that the north side of the river? If it's the
Yes.
north, is the river a north-south river? Or is it an east-west river, then goes
It's the
north-south?
It's the northeast side.
Yeah, oh, okay. So all these things are in a matter of moments. You want to give the direct term, when the public calls you. And I don't think call boxes are, because there's so many cell phones, call boxes are going by the wayside a little bit, but maybe there's something to look at. And maybe even using some of the bases of the transmission towers that exist there that bring power to the city for some marking on that. But I appreciate the training that the fire department has and the swiftwater teams that are located along the river, and then what you do to try to help people in need on that. So, and I do recall what you said. It was a Washington Day birthday. It was clear in the central city, and it was storming in the valley. And all of a sudden, the guys working down on I don't know which bridge it was, the 6th Street Bridge or whatever, the cement mixer went in, and a county sheriff helicopter was grounded because the fog in the San Gabriel Mountains was at East LA, and they came over before LA City Fire could get them out of the river, which was so dramatic. So you never know sometimes.
And one component that we have here in Los Angeles is we have a very unique dispatch system, because a river rescue is actually a moving incident, whereas it starts in one spot and could actually occur many miles away, and we have to actually predict that. So those are things going beyond just traditional mile markers. The initial call spot, but then where's our incident going to be by the time the first responders get on scene?
Right.
We know that a former staffer of mine had her dog go into the river, actually in the Arroyo Seco, and she thought she lost it, and days later wound up in a junkyard in Long Beach. So we know they travel, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your information and your support and all the good work your department does. Our next speaker is Chief Park Ranger Albert Torres. Are you here? And Gregory Randall.
Yeah, we stopped on the bridge.
Cool.
Good afternoon.
Yeah,
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Albert Torres. I'm the Chief Park Ranger, Recreation and Parks.
I'm Gregory Randall, Wildlife Specialist for the City of Los Angeles Animal Services.
Okay.
I'd like to concur with the Police Department and the Fire Department about the barriers and possibilities of the LA River, and want to give you a little bit of history about what the Park Ranger involvement in the LA River is about. The Park Rangers do safety response in Griffith Park and Elysian Park and at the Sepulveda Basin and at Hanson Dam. So invariably, there are incidents that occur within the LA River at the LA River bike path that the department responds to, our particular department, because we maintain the LA River bike path as it is now. And what we do in terms of safety is do a lot of the responses that you might see in Griffith Park. We might escort the fire department to an incident. We might handle a fire within an encampment in the LA River. we might conduct a scheduled cleanup, something that we do all the time relative to people who are encamped in park property. We give them ample notice. We make contact. We try to educate them about where they can and cannot be, and we are protective of their rights. We do rescue. We assist. Many of our rangers are trained in swift water rescue, so we are involved in that. One of the big things that our little division does is work with other agencies. So every month we meet with the group that is conducted by Mitchell Farrell, and we share information and obtain information. And within a particular incident, we might do some follow-up, and we might go back to a location. Very vivid in my mind was a patrol that I was involved in. A day before, a child was drowned in the Arroyo Seco. I happened to be patrolling alongside a park near Debs Park. And I thought to myself, I remember recalling vividly the amount of water that was flowing. It was not a lot, but it was very rapid. And the very following day, a child was drowned in that area. Also, I'd like to mention that we are very excited about the environment there, the nature that is provided there, and would just give you an image of a platoon of Canadian geese landing in the LA River near Los Feliz. And that would be just a beautiful sight and a beautiful thing to hear.
Thank you, sir.
Right on time.
Oh, right on the wire. Sir.
Okay. Being that I'm the wildlife officer for the city, I'd have some concerns about the activities that would be taking place in the river.
Could you just reintroduce yourself for the
I'm
record?
Officer Randall, Wildlife Specialist for the City of Los Angeles Animal
you.
Services. One of my concerns is what actions will be taken to protect the native and migrating birds that utilize the area from human activity that may disturb nesting times. Regards to refuse and increased human use of the natural area will bring its share of its own garbage. Currently, various forms of dangerous debris and hazardous waste flows in the river unabated that is injuring or killing the animals there now. Debris has been in the form of plastic bags, monofilament fishing line, cans, plastic containers, polystyrene containers, used motor oil, shopping carts, car parts, electronics. How will this be reduced, and who will enforce the laws to try and make sure these things are taken care of? Currently, also, many people walk their dogs in the river, often off leash because they believe the leash law doesn't apply there. The dogs often harass and or kill many of the birds that live along the waterway. And the increased activity with pets, how will that be dealt with now that more people will be coming to the area? Both the rangers and animal services have not had the staffing in the past to simply patrol the water at will. Will there be a higher fine for violations that may be taken up as a result of people bringing their pets unleashed in the waterway? Currently, the violation fine for a dog off leash in the river would run about $76, and one person was quoted, as far as I'm concerned, that's my fine that I have to pay for walking my dog off leash. It allows me to walk my dog off leash in the water. So a lot of people take it as a joke. Many of our tickets are dismissed in the interest of justice in the riverway when we've written tickets in there. Also, how will equestrians be dealt with when they bring their horses into the river? The concern being that if there is an area where there's a kayak that could collide with a horse, will there be some sort of monitoring system to make sure that that type of conflict doesn't take place? And back again on the birds, who's going to enforce protection of bird nests by curious children and people that may be tampering with them along the river's edge? So those are some of the concerns that I have regarding the river.
Thank you. Now, in terms of the ticketing policies for fishing and boating, who administers those tickets? Is that your department?
I would say any agency that has jurisdiction in that area, and including my department, the park rangers, we would cite for a violation in our presence, and we would respond to any kind of increase or a kind of a request by a citizen or somebody from the department about a problem like that.
Is there a level of uniformity and how that's being applied? Is it more of a chance issue if you happen to see it or someone reports it? And how does that come about?
Well, we're proactive in that we patrol from the LA River. We patrol from the freeway going northbound. We are apt to patrol because we're in a cul-de-sac on the other side of the river near department property like Central Service Yard or the LAPD mounted area or Las Feliz Golf. One particular day I followed a vehicle that was inside the LA River heading southbound, and I was northbound on the LA River. So in that way I was somewhat proactive. And then we are reactive in that people will call the park rangers at our Ranger Communication Center, and we will dispatch from there.
So is it policy for the city to ticket for fishing in the Los Angeles River? And if so, what is that based on? How much are we doing that, or is it not? I mean, I know obviously people need to have a fishing license for fishing in the state of California. That's a separate issue when people fish in Echo Park Lake or MacArthur Park. But do we do that in the river?
We have no policy to that effect. Mainly what we're concerned about is violations within the LA riverbed, and we have to be consistent with all parties. So
the violation is for being there. It's not for the fishing. It's not for the
correct.
activity. It's for actually physically being in the bed.
That's correct.
Okay. And that the code section that you're pulling that from is our own code, or is that the state?
It's a Los Angeles Municipal Code.
Okay. And how many tickets do you give out for being in the river bed each year? Or
I don't have that number, but I would say not enough to be concerned about in terms of numbers. But the impact has been great. We use that as a way to educate homeless people that can't be in there in the park, and we're
Right.
in the LA River.
Sure. I know. I appreciate the work and the task forces we've done with the Homeless Services Authority to help people have better places to be than the Los Angeles River. If somebody is there not camped out, though, but is fishing from the side and not physically in the water, right now we don't enforce anything against that. Is that correct?
For the most part, we're trying to be consistent. So if we have a park ranger who's in an area who is going to do that enforcement, it has to apply to everybody. So I believe that some people are falling victim because their intentions are there to do good for the LA River. But in the most part, what we're trying to do is just educate the public.
And so just to be clear, kind of burrowing down into some of this, it's anywhere off the top of the bank, that's or off of. I mean, I'm trying to distinguish between if somebody's not in the water physically, where is the line for at which point they're violating the municipal code?
From my perspective, as an officer, I would say anywhere down from the path.
From the path. Okay.
I'd like to add in something about
Sure.
the big problem that we're facing and becoming much more apparent lately is the problem with the monofilament fishing line. Recently, we had a situation with a Canada goose that suffered severe injury that was rescued and rehabbed, but not all of them so fortunate. This one was rescued and rehabbed and returned back to the location, rejoined with its family. But a lot of them lose their legs and have to be put to sleep because they cannot survive like that. People cut away their fishing line regularly and it floats down the river, it gets caught on other animals. Just yesterday we had a duck brought in from the LA River that had a fishing hook that was stuck in its wing. People aren't being very good about picking up their waste, and monofilament fishing line is waste, and it does severe damage. We're getting a lot of animals. We get that stuff floats out into the ocean and gets out into what's called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which, if you're not aware, that's 3.5 million tons of our refuse floating in the ocean. That's killing a lot of wildlife. So we need to do something to try and cut down on the extra trash that's going to be there. So if people are going to be allowed to fish, there needs to be monofilament fishing line stations for them to dispose of that fishing line. That goes back into recycling, and a much more proactive program to try and avoid causing damage to the wildlife there.
What do we do on our urban lakes for that, where we have fishing?
It really is random. It depends on where people put their efforts in. Different places they have, some places have taken that up as a cause, and they have those special stations put up where people can dispose of their fishing line. How they're enforcing that, I'm not aware of. If there's nobody there to watch, someone still may just cut the line away and let it be.
Yeah,
But-
Lake Balboa, I know that's come to our attention, the city council before, of some of the fowl that have been cut or choked by that as well.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for the information. Appreciate it.
I just want to thank, as a citizen back here, I think we should thank for that Canadian geese. Mr. Taylor, could you stand up? Mr. Taylor's the one who called our office. We called Mr. Randall right here, and action took place. Give him a little hand right there for that work there.
Of course, absolutely. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. All right. Our next set of speakers, we'd like to ask Barbara Romero, if you're here. Walt Young. Good afternoon, folks.
Good afternoon. Barbara Romero with the MRCA. I'm here really excited to hear you guys talking about water uses. As you know, our mission has always been to, get people excited about nature, and the best way to get people excited about nature is getting them as close as possible. And we've been, in the last over 15 years, we've been getting criticism. Why are you just working on the edges of the river? Because that's all we have access to at this point. But hearing you guys talk about potential uses and how we can get, into the river is an exciting opportunity. And we just wanted to, first of all, thank you for even having this discussion. I think working in the Santa Monica Mountains, a lot of the questions that are being asked are happening, we have trails in the Santa Monica Mountains, and we take care of wildlife up there. So I think it's something that's doable, it's something that's necessary, and we really got to look into furthering into making it happen in these next stages. But I just wanted to say that with all our little pocket parks and our bigger projects like the 5-acre marsh park, like Sunny Nook, we're working with the City of Los Angeles on, like Confluence, which is right now in construction. We have a construction project in Pacoima Wash. Those are just incremental, but unless we get people into the river to use the river, we're not going to get full buy-in to the to have people really see what the river can look like and to help implement the revitalization efforts that you guys have put together. So that's what I wanted to say, but I actually brought an expert, our chief ranger, to really talk to you more about what we recommend and where we are and what we're currently doing along the LA River and our tributaries. Walt Young.
Great.
Members, Walt Young, Chief Ranger, Mountains Recreation Conservation Authority. Been with the agency for 15 years, involved in river issues for about 13 of that 15. To answer your question, we actually refer to river left and river right. There is no north, south, east, or west, and it's as if you are floating down in a raft or a boat downstream. To your left is river left, to the right is river right. And that's how we do it for river rescue, as a matter of fact, as far as where we're going to put...
Fire department do the same thing? Okay, same thing. Good.
So there you go.
Thanks, Walt.
My pleasure. That's the easy part of it.
Yeah, it is.
Well, as Barbara said, currently we operate a series of pocket parks. I'd like to agree with all the other public safety agencies, particularly LAPD, who referred to them as spectacular. That was nice. Thank you. And primarily south of, what's across? Los Feliz. I always want to say Los Feliz. One of our previous staff members said that.
San Pedro,
There you go.
Tomato.
And currently we provide a wide range of services on the riverbank. For the pocket parks, that's ranger patrol, it's maintenance, it's graffiti, interpretation. But we are restricted in our activities to the riverbank because of the ongoing tension, if you will, between officially sanctioned, lawful activities and what none of us have really talked about before, and that is the historic neighborhood use. All the activities and problems that have been mentioned before by both fire and LAPD, those all occurred in an unsanctioned area. That's just historic use. And our position is this, that those steps that were taken in order to allow the bikeways to go into place, basically a risk management process where along the portion that's maintained by the city, where you did fencing, along the trapezoidal channel, you did lighting, you increased patrol. Those types of steps, that risk management process, we believe can be successfully applied to those activities that are currently not allowed, whether it be catch and release fishing, whether it be bird watching up close, whether it be navigating the waterways, if you will, because those activities are occurring now anyway. Right. And there is an existing risk to the public, even though it's not lawful for them to engage in those activities are occurring now, and our position is that a similar risk management process can take place, whether it be public education, signage, fencing where it's indicated, closing it off on high flow days, or whatever that list may be, in order to open up the river, open up the channel itself, so that the citizens can safely enjoy that asset. And with that, of course, is the problem. The problem is, as every public safety agency pointed to, that's not solved by capital dollars. To a certain extent it is, whether it be fencing, lighting, signage. What really takes is operational dollars, and that's always been the problem because that is not bond funded. What
Right.
the river needs is a dedicated pot of O&M, operations and maintenance money, that can be tapped by a variety of agencies in order to make this really happen.
And I appreciate what you're saying, and that is one of the strategic moves we like to make as a result of the master plan, is actually form that foundation, that River Corporation. We were hoping to have a joint powers authority with the county so we can have that multi-jurisdictional presence, along with the Army Corps and along with all the agencies that have been involved. And that hasn't moved as well as we would have thought, but we're not going to give up. But the bottom line is I agree with you completely. Even though we say we're not supposed to be there, it's happening already. And so the issue here is, how do we posture ourselves as a city family, as a multi-governmental agency that allows us to create a safer place, an attractive place, a destination, which is what the river should be. Colleagues, any questions or comments for our speakers?
Yeah, well, good. No, good.
I think there's one thing too, is that we want to make sure it's safe. That's the key, whether it's the fire department, police department. I know we're all anxious, and I know we're a little more mature and involved and understand the river as those being involved and active as we have been. But the key is we don't want to invite someone into something that would not be there. You know, there's one Walt, right? How many miles you cover, Walt?
Well, you know, it depends on who you ask and what day, but, you know, a good 8-9 miles.
Right. So it's a lot of area that you have to cover. And also educating the public in multiple languages on the challenges of water. I just really stress it. You know, the lifeguards have a different situation every summer because of some people are not, everybody should be taught to swim in Los Angeles. And so maybe we incorporate, this is just a thought, through recreation and parks at our public pools about not only the ocean, but also the river in some way. And not just our river. I know sometimes there's tragedy on Highway 39. What's the name of the creek up there that comes down 39 in Azusa, where people go swimming in there? San Gabriel River. And I think there's just an idea. So maybe there's an idea, if we could take note, Lupe, you know, that water education, whatever. Because even if it's not our river, it may be the Kern River, maybe some other family river, that we should educate people more about safety around the rivers and how to respect the waters.
In regards to that, there's already, from a grassroots point of view, that's already occurring. You have this Awa University, you have kids who came to our conference we had 2 years ago, where we talked about safety issues, the ecosystem, and that's something we need to continue enhancing. There's a whole group of primary schools around the riverway that we should be engaging and we should be informing, and hopefully those are steps we'll be taking in the near future.
I think we should come up with a plan, though. I mean, like Alessandro, Doris, Ivanhoe.
Well, I think as a
Griffin.
result of all this work, that's something that the outreach
Will come
program.
out of this?
Yeah.
Good, okay. We could identify it, because I think those is closest to it.
Yeah.
Because they all ride their bicycles to it.
Thank you. I'm good, actually. I'm going to wait till the end.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Great,
Thank you very much.
Great work, too.
Okay. Our next group of speakers, Mike Antos,
Boy, man, be careful.
as well as Shelley Backlar. Then we follow up with Larry Smith and Gary George.
Hi, I'm Mike Antos. I'm the Water Programs Coordinator at the Los Angeles and San Gabriel Rivers Watershed Council. I want to thank you for inviting us to participate in this. We think this is a really important talk. It fits right with our mission to improve the economic, social, and ecological health of the watershed, and the river sits right there at the middle of the watershed. What I want to tell you about is two monitoring projects, one in particular that we have ongoing right now. The first is in the San Gabriel River. It's the regional monitoring program that began in 2005. A Los Angeles River Watershed Monitoring Program began in 2008, and both are built off of the MPDES permits requirements for the LA County Sanitation Districts. That's a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. Both are broad partnerships with the council managing the monitoring. The primary funding for the LA side is through the City of Los Angeles and the City of Burbank. I have a one-page document which I can pass around that shows the complete partnership. The two monitoring plans speak to 5 particular objective questions about managing the river. The first is what is the condition of the streams in the watershed? Are the conditions of those streams areas of unique interest getting better or worse? Are receiving waters near discharges meeting water quality objectives? And then the last 2, which are most important to today's conversation, is it safe to swim? And are locally caught fish safe to eat? Now, both of these are built off of the beneficial uses which came out of the Basin Plan, originating from the Clean Water Act and the California Water Code. So, on the LA side, are the fish safe to eat? It's currently in a pilot step where we're going to be sampling at 5 locations: Lake Balboa, Echo Park, Peck Road Water Conservation Park, Glendale Narrows, Sepulveda Basin, and the Shoreline Aquatic Park. In this 2-year pilot stage, there'll be annual sampling focused on the most commonly fished species and focused on the chemicals that are often found in fish that are most harmful to humans. So that's mercury, DDT, and PCB. And that 2-year pilot program will eventually lead to a monitoring plan design for a longer-term process on the LA River. The other question is that safe to swim is based off the 2 beneficial uses that are called Rec 1 and Rec 2. Rec 1 beneficial use is body contact rec, and Rec 2 is non-body contact recreation. And of course, with fishing, it could be either of those. Somebody on a bridge fishing is Rec 2, somebody in the water fishing is Rec 1. And that's a question I didn't prep to speak at any great length at, but just understand that these monitoring programs in the 2 rivers are addressing both of those questions. The San Gabriel project, because it began sooner, there's reports coming out annually, with the first big report after 5 years of data, so 2010. The LA River side is just beginning monitoring now. There's still agreements being written up, but the monitoring begins now, and then 5 years of data has been decided to be the first statistical significant point in which to issue a report. So those are both ongoing with the Watershed Council.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that great work.
That's pretty good.
Good afternoon. My name is Shelley Backler. I'm the Executive Director for Friends of the Los Angeles River. And I thank you for beginning this dialogue. I think everyone's given such, from their perspective, such great points for us to focus on. I'd just like to step back and say, what do we define as access? The dictionary definition is the ability or right to enter or use. For Friends of the Los Angeles River, we have Joe Linton's book. You know, it describes all manners of access, this beautiful Bible to the Los Angeles River, tremendous resource for all of us. But who or what entity has the jurisdiction to grant the right to enter or use? And I think that's what we're here, we're all discussing aspects of that. I'm happy to say that today available is the first phase of our LA River fish study. We began in the Glendale Narrows region in response to seeing so many people fishing. And we wanted to understand, what are they catching? What's in the river? Are those fish safe for consumption? What kind of human health risks do we have? I'd love to give a more thorough report on this at another date, but for brevity, I'd like to just say that there are an amazing number of fish in the river. In 4 sampling days, we got over 1,200 fish. Carp were spawning in the Glendale Narrows. As far as our toxicity reports, we tested for mercury and PCBs. The levels are extremely low, almost negligible. Not conclusive, but promising.
Did you taste any of them?
I would. But the real thing is that people are using the river now, and they're out ahead of any plan, and they are constituents for change. They've already gotten the fact that this is a river, and it's a resource, and it's a destination. I think what we're looking at here is what policies do we go to when we want to get a permit to conduct certain activities. What policies do our rangers have to look at that say, these are what we look at, instead of subjective, really, which is what we're all looking at right now. So I am hoping that this is the beginning of a dialogue where we can all come together and find out, how can we do this safely and responsibly? How can we get fly fishing clinics on the river where we talk about the ecosystem and we we celebrate that your line's not going to get caught and brushed because we have concrete. And that's why people are coming from Kern River Valley and from Redondo Beach to use our river. And this is the kind of thing that we want to start talking about more often.
You know, as a kid, almost about 10, 11 years old, we used to catch buckets of catfish. But I don't see any catfish in your...
No, we did, and we
There is?
tested catfish, too.
Oh, you did
Bullhead
catch catfish.
catfish,
Okay.
Amazon sailfin catfish.
I thought I was curious.
Yeah.
A largemouth bass.
All right.
Yeah,
That one.
one
Okay.
largemouth bass.
Why do you think the frogs have left the river?
Well, we've got a compromised ecosystem. You know, we've got to look at what our indicator species are, and frogs are delicate. But what else can we look at? We can look at the insects.
I believe the frogs were there when there wasn't water, before Tillman was built, the plant in Sepulveda, and also before Glendale, Los Angeles was built. As a little bit older than Ed, but as someone who also made its way to the river, I would catch frogs all summer long, and I think the only, and then the water obviously got polluted, but the water's cleaned up, as you could find from your study. And I don't know if the flows have changed the frogs. I occasionally hear frogs in Griffith Park. I do, near the observatory in a pond that may probably make their way up from Ferndale. But as far as the numbers, I mean, there were high numbers of frogs in the park. I don't know if there's a detailed study, but it's worth it to do a detailed study,
Well,
maybe.
the great thing is that we're all talking about the river as a river, and one aspect is flood protection, but that's not the only aspect of this river.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? Seeing none, thank you very much. I know we have probably questions a little bit later. Our next set of speakers, Larry Smith and Gary George. Please come on up.
Hey, Ed, I got to do a little work in my office, and I got to pick up my kids. Could I split? Okay, thanks. Thank you. See you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good.
Great.
Is this on? Yeah, good.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Gary George, and I'm the Chapter Network Director for Audubon, California. I'm also the Conservation Chair of Los Angeles Audubon. And 3 chapters of Audubon have been enjoying and protecting birds on this river for over 100 years. That's Los Angeles Audubon, San Fernando Valley Audubon, and Pasadena Audubon. 2 other chapters are engaged on this river. So this is a very important river for us, and we think for birds, very, very important for birds. The key sites, especially for us, are Sepulveda Basin, of course, Glendale Narrows, and the most important, the 7-mile stretch between that covers Paramount, Compton, and Long Beach. So in 2004, this part of the lower river, I think you may know this, was named an important bird area by a national priority conservation effort by Audubon. There's only 3 important bird areas in the county of Los Angeles, and this is one of them, because with the loss of 90% of our wetlands, tens of thousands of migratory shorebirds stop there on their way coming from Alaska or parts north to parts south. So they rely completely on the dry weather flows from the Tillman water facility. So any change in that flow would have a disastrous effect on a world population of shorebirds. They belong to all the countries in North America, not just us. So that's very important to us. We want to make another point that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did a survey of recreational activities in the United States of America. This was released first in 2001 and then updated 2006. I can provide that. 46 million citizens 16 years or older in the U.S. consider themselves bird watchers. They leave their home to go look at birds specifically in nature. 24% of them identified themselves as white, 9% identified themselves as Hispanic, 6% as African American, and 6% Asian, and 22% Native American. They spent over $32 billion leaving their homes on products, retail products, and hospitality, restaurants, and hotels. So we think that when you're thinking about the revitalization of the LA River, that bird watching is an important economical component as well as a flood control component or other components. So they spent $32 billion and they created over 863,000 jobs. So we'd like to make 2 recommendations to this committee. We'd like you to identify opportunities to restore the riparian habitat along the river as well as adjacent scrub and grasslands to increase the river as habitat for our birds and for recreational and economic value, like Portland and Chicago have done. They're great models in considering birds, and also that you form a technical advisory subcommittee for wildlife with some authority, especially if you can get the Joint Powers Authority, to actually provide peer-reviewed science on the protection and mitigation for birds on the LA River.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Before you leave, before Councilor LeBons leaves, I did have one action item that would be to direct BOE to follow up with each for more information and suggestions, and to report back in January 2009.
You, just a quick question. You said 32 billion?
Yep.
Does that include people who watch
That's
the
2001 figure.
Orioles and the Cardinals and the Seahawks?
You bet.
No, that's a good way to get that. I like that. That's a man. All right,
So
good. Thank you.
They stop
I'm
in the
assuming
parks
that's a
on
yes,
their way.
Tom. When we want to direct, you guys agree with that directive, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, that's
And it was great. I was actually with Joe Edmiston there last year at the river, and vis-a-vis what the Folar study said, we knew there were fish there when we saw an osprey come and just land and sit there for a long time and just watch the river go by. And it was most powerful evidence I had seen in a long time that river had really come
birds are actually one of the most important key indicators of the health of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Smith?
Well, thank you. It's a wonderful day to have this conversation and an ongoing conversation. I'm Larry Smith, Executive Director with Northeast Trees and now Greenway LA.
Sorry, that's all the time we have today for you.
I'm done. That was quick. I had all these notes. I don't know. Okay, anyways, actually, what I want to talk about is that this conversation is about a transformation of the river, and you guys have done a great job in the leadership and the revitalization master plan. But I want to also point out that in this transformation discussion, we need to change the nature of the debate. If we're talking about navigability versus non-navigability, I think that's the wrong way of looking at this resource. I think this Western rivers, as has been noted earlier, are not like other rivers. It doesn't devalue them. They have value as the primary drainage of the watersheds that we live in. And these watersheds need to be protected. The water quality and water supply issues are germane to this watershed regardless of how the rivers flow, whether they're on the surface or not on the surface. So I would like to recommend that we change that debate, the nature of that debate that links to funding. We've been about transforming and through restoring nature services, improving the quality of life in our communities. I have about 6 principles I'd like to recommend as guiding principles for how we go forward. First is do no harm. Be careful that as we're doing these improvements, that gentrification does not drive residents out of their local businesses and their homes. This is a challenge for any kind of urban design effort. Be cautious about the use of eminent domain. It's best to have willing partners as much as possible and stakeholders in these endeavors. Second guiding principle, the legal framework of risk management needs revamping. This looms as perhaps the single most critical barrier, as has been noted several times, to people having access to the river. At some point, people have to be responsible for some common sense. We have to learn about the resource. We have to continue to educate about the resource and the power of water. This is an ongoing effort and will never stop. It's true anywhere in the country. This is an issue where people have access to water. And it's about old-fashioned values of individual accountability and responsibility. The third principle, respect diversity in associations. This includes both people and plants and the local materials that we use and so forth. It includes people and groups already mobilized to contribute to this revitalization. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to remove barriers to the goals and practice of revitalization and restoration. Removing barriers is a role of government. Developing programs, projects is not necessarily the role of government. They can help, but development must be collaborative if it is to be about the people and the community. Such models do exist, and they should be enhanced rather than compromised or dismissed. The fourth guiding principle, follow the water, use nature. The path of restoration should be organic. Increase natural water infiltration during rain events, reduce dry season stormwater runoff. There's a whole slew of these things that I could list. I don't have that much time. The fifth guiding principle, more benefits the better. All programs and projects should be judged through that filter. The more benefits they provide, the better the opportunity, the better the possibilities. And the sixth principle, not the least, is community stewardship. Eyes on the river. The more eyes on the river, the more people who are taking responsibility are engaged in this process, the more safety there is, the greater the chance that the actual projects will actually take place and that they will be sustained through stewardship by the community.
Thank you. Again, thank you for your hard work and all the products you produced and many different levels for kids, the communities. Thank you so much.
Thank
you, sir. Thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Tony Taylor.
A couple things just before the public, just because I think it'll inform some of the public comment. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for working with us to do this today, and I think this is absolutely where we wanted to start this discussion. And it's funny that, Larry, you had that list of your principles, because the whole time people were writing, I started writing down. It wasn't as brilliant and as insightful, but it was some guiding principles to put forward as we instruct what we want to see come out of this. And I had, one, that public feels safe; two, that habitat and wildlife is protected; three, that there be public access, that be a principle; four, that there be rights and responsibility of individuals, so you have both rights but also responsibilities with the river; and then fifth, government has a role to maintain and to enable. And so, there are a number of similar points that I had written down, and I think as we look at this, and I'll defer to you, Mr. Chair, but I certainly think one of the things, and as the public comes forward too to testify, I think would help looking at that January plan is to have some of these, and I've had discussions with Fuller and others, have some subgroups that are working on wildlife, with birding and fishing, I think, being two kind of aspects of that, biking, maybe boating and swimming together as one, because I think they have similar risks, and at least from our side, from the city, considerations, and maybe even another one on riding, because of the equestrian communities kind of has some unique needs as well. And I think there are really smart and really engaged and really interested people that want to give us some of that output of how we get to yes rather than why we say no. And I hope that folks respect, the great job that our professionals are doing, the police, our fire, animal services, and rec and parks, are trying to ensure that people are safe. But I also get the point that people are saying we got to get to a point where, like any body of water, if we lived in a rural area, if there's a lake, there's certain responsibility. We need to educate so that we don't have an urban kid who knows no idea about what nature can do, suddenly steps into something and loses his or her life, or something less bad. But I think that's a move in that same direction of how do we get to yes rather than how can we find a reason to say no. So we can put some of those principles in. I'd love to hear what the public has to say about that too.
So I'm hoping the staff will be working on this report. Takes note of the comments made by Councilman Garcetti. Appreciate that. Sure. Okay, so now we have public comments, and we have Tony Taylor and Louis McAdams. Please come on up. There's a microphone for each one of you. And George Wolfe. There's 3 microphones.
George had to leave.
George had to leave?
Oh, still here. Oh,
Hey, George, already sending your way. Come on up. Mr. Taylor, please. Give us your name and address.
My name is Tony Taylor. I live in North Hollywood. I would like to thank Councilman LaBonge for his help with the Canada Goose, and Chief Ranger Torres and Greg Randall. The goose is doing fine now. The only way we can tell her now is that she's banded. We have been feeding up to 112 Canada geese every day for the last few weeks. A lot of the birds have started to migrate in. I'm very concerned about the river. We've had incidents with people with guns. Last week, not this past week, the week before that, on Tuesday, I had 5 little jerks with a gun. They're on the east bank, by Legion Lane. Then on Thursday, there were 4. They were on the other side of the river on the west bank, deciding to shoot at the wildlife. Through the park rangers, I got put in touch with the General Services Police, and they did apprehend the little jerks over by the tennis courts there. But that's a big problem out there. I think one of the other people who put in a card is going to tell you about a dog that got shot a couple of weeks ago there in Atwater Village. It's very sad, the things that people do. The problem with the fishing is a big problem because the people are not careful. They leave their fishing line. I am constantly picking up fishing line, fishing hooks. The duck that Greg told you about that was taken there yesterday, I found she was dying. I think she had avian botulism, but she also had this rusty fishing hook in her wing. And they just cut it off instead of taking it out. And that's what the folks do. They don't care. We need signs out there. We've asked for years for signs. There needs to be signs what the hours of operations are, what is allowed and what isn't. Loopy I want to thank her too because she's got some signs together, but they are on the opposite side. They're in Atwater Village. They're on the west bank by the bicycle path. They're up on the towers, and you can't really see the signs. They're about the ordinance about being in the riverbed, which is very unclear because there's no definition of what the riverbed is I've been ticketed 3 times underneath that ordinance, and I'm not in the riverbed. So I'd like to see signs that could be put up, big signs like we have in the parks. And you can put those on I can show people where to put them if they have to be on city property.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And that's so important to me.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate your consistency. You've come to committee several times, and I appreciate the fact that you take the time and the energy to express yourself. And again, appreciate everything you do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tony.
Lewis McAdams?
I'm Lewis McAdams from Friends of the Los Angeles River. I just wanted to talk about an actual real issue that's actually happening that we're having to deal with is the increasing hassles that we've been getting in terms from the county in terms of ongoing activities, river cleanups, outdoor education days. We have an outdoor education day scheduled for Friday with 800 school kids down in Long Beach, and the county bulldozed all the area that we plan to show these kids and show them flora and fauna and do water quality monitoring. We have been increasingly hassled in terms of our river cleanups, and this year I would like it if we could get a motion from the City Council endorsing the Los Angeles River cleanup. This is our 20th anniversary, and the only reason we were able to even do the last year's cleanup was because we only worked in the core. We got permission from the Corps. And so we only were able to work in core areas rather than in areas that the county is in charge of. So, I mean, I'd like to see that come down, if possible.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McAdams. Okay, thank you very much.
Follow up on that.
Yeah, we'll work together to do a motion.
We have a motion that we can do within the city's jurisdictions,
Okay.
and we'll
It's
take
no
it from
hurry,
there.
'cause
And let us know in the county, because, I'm sure the chairman and I will be happy with that, to contact them and ask them if they can help us.
Okay. Mr. Wolfe?
Hi, my name's George Wolfe. I led a group of about a dozen kayakers and canoeists down the LA River, the full length of the LA River this past summer at the end of July, proving the river to be navigable in fact and doing our best as citizens to shed more light on the issue of traditional navigable waterways in general. We have a 30-page report that's available now for viewing. I think some people may have seen it by now. And our goal is to continue advocating for recreational boating and general river access and a broad TNW determination on behalf of the LA River. Since our expedition, we've been hearing about a lot of other urban river projects that are very exciting, that have been successful in renaturalizing their rivers, often with substantial economic benefits, which in these times I think is something to consider as well. San Antonio's River Walk, the Isar River in Munich, the Love River in Taiwan, only adds further evidence in our minds to the notion that the LA River isn't a hopeless cause and that changes needn't take 50 years either to realize. And then finally, in thinking about what we can do today and recommendations, we have our own safety recommendations in our report. People should take a look at that. It's similar, I think it echoes what I've heard here today, things about public education and signage, as opposed to keeping people off the river to begin with. Also, in terms of future use of the river, we're interested in getting access to lead supervised and limited commercial and supervised educational programs that would introduce local kids and the general public to safe, fun, and ecologically responsible boating on the LA River. We would intend to do this in the Glendale Narrows and or the Sepulveda Basin, and to work with Riverside schools, city residents, and city visitors to do that through boating. As an adventurous mode of introduction, people will get to learn about the river through ecology, biology, the arts, birding, fishing, environmental stewardship, global citizenry, so that we can all build a new generation of great memories about the LA River.
I found it exciting in different cities. You have different examples of successes. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they have what they call river taxis, and it doubles up as a way to show folks, going from point A to point B, about the ecosystems and the issues. And so they kind of take advantage of the commercial aspect of it and introduce a whole new group of folks about what the ecosystem means, how the river is connected, et cetera, et cetera. Absolutely. So, and I agree with you. I hope it doesn't take 50 years either. But we're pushing hard.
Just a couple quick questions. First of all, congratulations on the trip and on its success. What were some of your interactions with habitat and wildlife on the trip like? I mean, were there any issues there? How did you as a human being at the boat, interact kind of with the waterfowl that were there? Anything else? Were there any problems or any?
There are no problems that to speak of. We had amazing interactions with both birds and fish.
Mm-hmm.
We saw an abundance of fish all over the place. Same with the birds. Obviously, it depends on the stretch of the river.
Sure.
But it's overwhelming. We have become sensitive to issues that birding groups raise in terms of boating, and I think it's a great way to work together. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
I think they fit well together. We boaters need to become more conscious about things that might affect nesting seasons and that sort of thing. But those are all details that can be worked out. I really don't see that as a huge problem. And the same thing with fishing and their habitats. To become a little more conscious of what the concerns are environmentally with fish and birds.
And just what was the best experience of the entire trip for you, if you had to point to one thing?
Always, the Glendale Narrows sticks out. It's just a phenomenal Class 1 stretch of rapids that's a real gold mine in terms of boaters' views that the city has to offer. And the fact that we feel like we have to skulk around to get access to it seems is a difficult thing to swallow.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, gentlemen, for your hard work.
Can I say one just briefly?
Sure.
You had 58 seconds left.
That's all I
Fine.
need. This is the first study of the fish of the Los Angeles River. There's copies in back for everybody to look at and be amazed by.
Thank you very much. Okay, the last two cards, we have Joe Linton, and this one doesn't have a name, but it says business organization affiliation is residents. I left the phone number 213-891-2064. Oh, please come on up. Be the last two speakers. Mr. Linton.
Hi, Joe Linton. I was also on the kayak trip, and just want to say that it was fantastic. There's definitely water. It's definitely navigable, and it's definitely a lot of fun. And in terms of wildlife, you actually get a lot closer to wildlife because they're less scared of you on water than they are on land. I'm grateful to see the public safety folks on board and getting out to the river and getting on board this. And I think the more we can, a lot of existing areas, including some of the areas that the captain saw and recommended people go to, are technically not legal to access today. Some of those parks that Northeast Trees built. The more we can open that up, finish the bikeway, get these areas legally open to the public, the better that will be. So I'd encourage the city to work on areas that have de facto access to make that legal.
Are you, given the Bible you've written on this, are there areas that you could identify that are, I'm going to say, the most desirable and least dangerous, so that we can make it accessible?
Well, I think I'd start with the areas on the Atwater side of the river, in Atwater, like below Los Feliz. That's not officially open to the public at like Red Car River Park.
I guess I'm asking is that for the
as well as Elysian Valley, which is used by hundreds of people every day, but technically not legally.
But given the January report that we're asking, perhaps you can share that with the staff, and that can be part of the report. You don't have to answer it right now, but
Okay.
But there are certain sections that seem to be much more accessible than others, that are not as dangerous, that have natural connections to the communities. If you can identify those from a person who goes in and out of the river quite often, that would be a good perspective to hear from.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Ma'am, please give us your name and address.
Helena Salamajo, Legion Lane, resident of Atwater, between Los Feliz and the footbridge of Los Feliz and Glendale Boulevard. We have two access ways from Legion Lane. It's a small street, but there's still two access ways from each end of our street to the Los Angeles River. Within the last 2 weeks, we've had gunfire on Tuesday, on the West Bank, on Thursday, on the East Bank, and I believe when they finished with their gun, they came down Legion Lane. A few nights later, we heard shots. We called the police and told them we heard the gunfire and we heard a dog howl. The police went up, looked, up, it's right up the Sunny Nook and Legion Lane. There's a dirt path. Right up there is where they looked. The following morning, my neighbor found his dog shot, still alive, and crawled to him. They called the police again. Nothing could be done. Obviously, the dog is dead now. But my concern is, I'm glad you are interested in the Los Angeles River, but what are your thoughts about the residents who have to deal with the problems relating to the Los Angeles River?
I think what you see before you is a real effort in trying to create environmental changes so those shots don't occur anymore. I think what you see before you is a whole group of advocates and stakeholders who want to change how we live day to day on those streets so that you don't hear shots anymore. There's this direct educational element involved. We're trying to create jobs. We're trying to create a whole different way in which we interact with this river. So those conditions that you're describing, which are very painful, which are very real, and they happen day to day, every night in my district, need to change. And that's what we're trying to do, is change those factors, those very real conditions, so that they can be dealt with in the future and eliminated in the future. But we have to start somewhere. And it's not going to happen overnight. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to convince you it's going to happen overnight. It's not.
I'd like to make just one further
Please.
statement. I'm a longtime resident of Legion Lane, and I think when it was closed, there was a lot less. I think the residents felt safer. There was a lot less gunfire. When it became open is, I think, when it attracted people there that are misusing it.
I appreciate that, and perhaps we
I've
can.
been there over 50 years, so I'm not just speaking a few years.
I understand.
Long term, telling you what's happening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Okay, anybody else here?
Just one quick thing. At the Crystal Street Park, which is one of the parks we talked about, the cul-de-sac at Fletcher Drive on the west side of the LA River, the right side. We're having a day at the river from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. on Saturday, November 8th. But a good chance to meet neighbors, advocates, and to further discuss some of these issues and to see some of it in play, so we don't just talk about them in committee, but we have the chance to do it along the river as well. So come join us and spread the word, please.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I also want to state that we will continue this item in case there's other speakers that would like to present or address this committee. I think the more interaction we have at this stage, the better off we'll be. I want to thank Councilman Garcetti for stewardship and making sure we put this in the committee and actually move it in such a way where we can build some real policy. So we'll keep this open for the next committee as well. I do want to make a couple announcements. We have a stream protection workshop Wednesday, October 22nd at the LA River Center at 7 p.m. It's an extra committee meeting regarding stream protection in Los Angeles, and it's been, again, arranged for that time. We also have the river improvement overlay process that is continuing. In light of the feedback we received during the initial circulation, the second draft of both documents is now ready for public comment. The public comment period begins today and closes on, it began September 25th and closes on Thursday, October 27th. So again, I thank you for your participation and making sure that those venues are available to you and you respond to the comments for our different policy issues we're trying to establish. Anybody else here for public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.